First time I heard Luther's name, I was 8 years old. I was in 3rd grade. My mama came in to wake me up, and she said, "Son, you can go back to sleep. You don't have to go to school today." And I said, "Are you sure, Mama?" She said, "Yes, because Luther said that." I didn't know who this Luther guy was, but I thought, I'd like to meet him. He sounds pretty cool. He closed school for me today. And he did that over and over. One more reason to love him. Now, the first time I actually met Luther, I was emceeing a banquet at which he was honored for the umpteenth time, because he had already won Man of the Year, he'd already gotten the key to the city, he'd already won the Distinguished Service Award from every organization known to man. And so I was up there reading the script that had been given to me, listing all these honors. And I got about halfway through, and Luther hopped up out of his chair and said, David, wrap it up, that's enough." And I did, and he said, "Let's get on with this." That was, he didn't enjoy hearing all those accolades repeated in front of people. He sat back down at the table, and I said, "Mr. Masingill, call me Luther. Luther, I just want you to know it's an honor to meet you. You, sir, are a big deal to me." He said, "David, let me tell you a story. Last week I was driving down 3rd Street, and there was this woman in a car in the next lane, and she kept waving and pointing, and I smiled back at her, hello, and we got up to the next light, and she started waving and flailing even more frantically, and I smiled a little more and waved back, and sure enough, we get to the next light, and she's just going crazy, pointing and waving. I rolled down my window and said, "Ma'am, yes, it's me, Luther. You see me on radio and TV, but you don't have to make such a scene." She said, "Sir, I don't know who you are. I'm just trying to tell you, you left your jug of milk on top of the car." He said, "That's how big a deal I am." Not long ago, he was riding along with me. We were going to speak at a local church. And we get there, and I still have a picture of this. The sign outside the church said, "Coming Tuesday. David Carroll," in big letters, and then in little small letters underneath, also Luther. We pulled up. I said, "Luther, this is ridiculous. They must have run out of big letters or something." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, look at this. It's like you're going to Las Vegas and the sign would say, 'Appearing tonight, Vanilla Ice, also Elvis.'" He said, "Elvis who?" I said, "Luther, he's one of those new up-and-coming acts. We'll catch up later." We didn't even start talking about Vanilla Ice. But I loved those church visits because, honest, I mean, I'm not making this up. An 80-year-old man would come up to him and say, "Luther, I listened to you when I was in 3rd grade." And he was telling the truth. It was the truth. No one else in the world could say that or listen to that. These older folks would come up to him and say, "Luther, how old are you?" "Well, I'm 92. "Do you still drive?" "Yes, and I can still hear too. You don't have to yell." Happened over and over. He loved telling that story. And the great thing about today and this beautiful scene here, we are at this stadium where he used to sit right up there back in the 1940s, and he would introduce the Lookouts players. This baseball chapel used to be the scene of Luther saying, "Now batting for the Lookouts, 3rd baseman Hillis Lane." And the crowd would go wild. And think about this. We're on TV right now. We're on the radio right now. We're on the World Wide Web right now. This event is being streamed worldwide, and you just know Luther up there somewhere is going, "Law, law, law. What is going on?" We have been blessed beyond measure. I think about James and Chip and so many of Luther's colleagues here from WDEF. Wow, how lucky you have been to work side by side with this man every day for so many years. It's just such a beautiful thing. And the thing I love about visiting the radio station the other day, some of the guys, James and Kim and Patty and Jason and Brad, all these people telling me how Luther just wanted to be one of the guys. He loved the kidding and the teasing, and I remember during my 4 years of working over there, he loved to kid and tease me. I would be in the Channel 12 studio interviewing the governor or a U.S. senator, and Luther would wait for just the appropriate time to poke his head in the door, and when there was a little break in the conversation, he'd go, "Excuse me, David, Walgreens just called. They said they're sorry, but they don't have Preparation H in 55-gallon drums." "Thanks, old pal. Duly noted." And the governor would look at me like, well, I said, don't ask. I was always honored to do his show when he was on vacation, 2 weeks a year maximum, for about 20 years. All those phone calls, all those missing pets, the live commercials, and you're all trying to squeeze it all in a certain amount of time, and the pressure to get it done at the right time. Folks, that's the hardest work I've done in broadcasting, was filling in for Luther. On the other hand, it was nothing to him. He'd get up and hit that cold linoleum every morning for 70 years, and he would not call in sick because he loved it so much. He was the personification of, if you get a job you love, you'll never do a day of work in your life. He really lived by that. And when you think about it, everybody in here and everybody watching and listening wherever you are today, we had Luther in our lives for our entire life. He outlived most of his contemporaries, those he grew up with, those he served in the military with, those that he came up in broadcasting with. So Luther adopted us. You didn't have to know Luther. You know, you could go up to him anywhere in public. "Hey, Luther." And he would stop what he was doing. He would pose for a picture. He'd give you a handshake or a hug. He'd buy your lunch. And if you tried to pay him back, he was the fastest 92-year-old man ever. He would always run away before he could hand him back the money. And the one thing, though, when he walked away, he would always say the same thing, and you all have heard it. We'd say, "Bye, Luther, bye, and listen, if you ever lose your dog, call me." And that was dog, D-A-W-G, dog. And we loved listening to Luther's stories, especially about his younger days. We have some students here today from Central High School, and let's give them a hand. They have been so wonderful to be with us here today. Thank you. Luther loved Central High School. Yes, take a bow. Thank you. Luther loved Central High School. He was a proud member of the class of 1941, and he never looked back with anything but love for that school. We have the home movies. Maybe you've seen them on television or online this week. He was that wavy-haired kid. He was the one with the outgoing personality. Everywhere I've gone the last few years, people who went to school with Luther, and evidently that senior class was about 12,000 because everybody went to school with Luther. They tell me about how he was a gymnast. He was very strong. He was very athletic. He wasn't a particularly big guy, but he was just very strong. And he fell in love with this microphone the first time he saw it. He emceed all the talent shows, did all the announcements. He was Mr. Central High School. When he got a job at Bill Penny's service station on Dodds Avenue, right down the road from Central, a man named Joe Engel, Engel Stadium, a man named Joe Engel couldn't help but notice that voice on the intercom. "Mr. Engel, your car is ready, Mr. Engel." And Joe said, "You know, it just so happens I'm putting a new radio station on the air. It's going to be the third one in the city. There were just two at the time. Maybe you want to audition, try out, be a junior cub announcer." And Luther said, "You know, really all I want to do is answer the phones for the real disc jockeys." And Joe said, "Go ahead, try out. We'll give you a script. You can do an audition." So Luther recorded a script, and he did really well except for two words. The word salon, where you get your hair done, Luther thought it was saloon. And the biblical figure Job, as in the patience of Job, Luther pronounced that job. But Mr. Engel liked what he heard. He said, "You know what, you sound good." So Luther got a job. And He started on the nightly Jitterbug Jamboree in 1941, soon worked his way up to the Sundial, the morning show. And when he returned from service after World War II, his listeners welcomed him with open arms. They laughed as he pushed a peanut with his nose down Broad Street. They watched as he had won a bet with his pal Ernie Fagans, who had to push Luther in a wheelbarrow down Market Street in the big parade. And in 1951, this town had a collective chuckle when Luther ran for mayor as a joke. And on my lapel, I have the original, little tiny 1951 campaign button, "We Want Luther." He promised his listeners anything they wanted. He'd say, "Call in and tell me what you want, and I'll put it in my platform and run for mayor." They said, "Well, we need a bridge, we need a tunnel." "Done, I'll take care of it, we'll take care of that." He was promising free haircuts for bald-headed men. Done. And it got to the point to where people were just in love with this campaign. And you've heard the name Old Jotty, you know, the Old Jotty Bridge. Rudy Old Jotty was running for mayor, and he called Luther a couple days before the election and said, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm just having fun." "Well, stop, you're going to win." Luther said, "That people aren't taking me seriously." "Oh, yes, they are, Luther." And so Luther had to take out a full-page ad letting people know, "I'm just kidding. Go vote on Tuesday, but vote for a real candidate." And you know, even today, you'll see candidates making outrageous promises just to get elected. Well, I'm here today to tell you it all started with Luther Masingill.